Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and the War Within Beta is finally here. Not only did we see a massive influx of players, but also the servers were essentially on fire. Though through the fire and flames and the disconnects every few seconds, we were finally able to at least create a few characters and test them out over on the beta, and even run some group dungeons, whether it is cross-faction dungeons or random dungeon normal queues as well. Now, there's not a lot of seasonal content to do right now on the beta, but for the most part we get a chance to finally play our classes, test out the hero specs, try the different tier sets, and for many this is their chance to get a first glimpse at how some of these classes play. But also, this means we get a brand new build, this time for the beta, with a ton of class changes. And I wanted to continue our regular class coverage over on the War Within, this time highlighting the class of the Evoker, which we haven't really got to spend a lot of time on, since I've been spending way too much time with mages, warlocks, and death knights as I continue to get revamps after revamps after revamps. But finally, we can take a look at some of the talent changes and some of the bigger adjustments coming to Evokers even as early as this week. But we'll also go over some of the earliest stuff they've gotten from early alpha days. But if you guys enjoy these kind of regular class updates over on the War Within, be sure to follow the channel. Otherwise, let's dive right in. So when it comes to Evokers, I'm first going to go over some of their general changes over the last few weeks on the alpha, but also highlight and add in what are some of the newer stuff that have happened, just to give you guys a bit of a refresher and a bit of an overview, since I feel like it's been quite a bit of time since we talked about Evoker, where last time we really covered them a ton was when they initially added the newest spec of Augmentation, and that was way back during Season 2, I think patch 10.15, not 10.17. Either way, when it comes to Evokers, we'll first start off with some of the generalized changes. By the way, the Mog for the tier set is amazing looking. The bonuses themselves are fairly plain, but every class gets plain bonuses, but look at the looks. It looks amazing, and it's even better when you start taking a look at some of their other appearance options, such as the mythic appearance. You get the shadow flame look. It looks great. So if you are considering playing Evoker, just at least play them for the looks, because not only are they going to do more damage, more healing, and be better as Aug, but the actual set looks absolutely amazing. To get out some of the general changes that Evokers have gotten, this is going to be a mix of some of the newer stuff, but also some of the older stuff they've gotten in the past. So things like Renew and Blaze are in a different spot, since it is a very popular defensive option for self-survivability. Therefore, they made it much easier for Evokers to reach Renew and Blaze as early as possible. So picking it down from the middle tree from Draconic Legacy, which is more defensiveness, into more defenses, and then you get to pick out some of your utility, with things such as Swords of Magic are on the right hand side, which is fairly easy to talent into. There are some different things such as Panacea now awarding you healing from Emerald Blossoms, but also Verdant Embraces, which is huge when you're trying to heal others or heal yourself. Now you're gonna have two sources of self-survivability, which is a pretty big bonus, even though the healing isn't a lot. I mean, 93,000 healing when we have 4.2 million health with some of the higher end gear, it's not really a lot when you put it into context. Also, Overawe from the ability of Oppressing Roar did get a bit of a nerf, because Overawe used to give you more cooldown reduction for every enrage that it removed. So in certain Mythic Plus weeks, especially during Raging weeks, when enemies have a ton of enrages that you can remove, you can really cut down the cooldown of this ability. Now they cap it at 30. So the most amount of downtime you can have for the Oppressing Roar ability is about 1.5 minutes, which isn't amazing for high-end content, which overall is a pretty big nerf when it comes to that Evoker utility. Also, this is a change that happened a while ago, but Time Spiral is now on the same point as Spatial Paradox, though this ability does have a 3-minute cooldown, but Augmentation, Preservation, and Devastation all bring Spatial Paradox, which is one of the bigger changes they've gotten over their time throughout Alpha and now into Beta. But with the general changes out of the way, we also got some spec changes. For the most part this week, however, they did end up focusing on Augmentation for a good portion, which a lot of you will be happy if you don't really like Augmentation from a buff perspective, but want it to be more of a self-sufficient DPS spec. There are a lot of talents to help you be a little bit more self-sufficient and a lot bit more damage oriented. Of course the servers would go down while I'm in the middle of this. This has been happening constantly since the launch of beta, so I knew. And they're fixing this tomorrow apparently, so I knew that me sitting down and talking about classes is going to be an absolute impossibility. Thank goodness you paid extra for the Epic Edition so you could test the loaded screen for us. We appreciate it. Jokes aside, we are going to see some new stuff that happening with Devastation and Preservation. I want to cover those specs very briefly, just because it's not going to take long before we really dive into the depths that is the augmentation changes. So the main stuff you need to worry about when it comes to Devastation are a handful of talent adjustments and new talents. Look, for the most part, we know that the bottom right section of the Devastation, if you play it regularly, is some of the more popular talents, but the bottom left hand side doesn't get enough play, so they're trying to make these parts a bit more competitive. So, things like Scorching Embers, which is a damage buff. Fire Breath causes enemies to take 20% increased damage from your red spells, which gives you multiple reasons to prioritize some of the red fire-based abilities. We have things such as Snapfire, which has been a bit redesigned. Pyre and Living Flame have a 50% chance to cause the next Firestorm to be instant cast without triggering its cooldown, so you can get more uses out of your Firestorm, which just doesn't get a lot of play generally. Feed the Flames could also have been redesigned a little bit. Not only does it give you 9 Pyres a chance for your next Pyre to cast a guaranteed Pyrestorm, but in addition, Pyre and Disintegrate now deal 20% increased damage to enemies within Firestorm. So if you are playing Firestorm, there is now a little bit more of a burst capability as long as enemies stay in there. So there may be some use out of the ability going forward, but they're really trying to make that whole side of the tree work. Though, all of you that are playing and enjoying Devastation ever since the beginning of Dragonflight will be very unhappy to see this here. Animosity has, over the last few weeks, has now gotten a cap on just how much you can extend Dragon Rage, where casting Empowerment spells extends the ability by 4 seconds up to a maximum of 16 additional seconds, and that is probably the most heartbreaking part of this Dragon Rage adjustment, because this is part of that skill expression of Devastation. The more often you can utilize your Empowerment abilities inside of that limited Dragon Rage window, the better you can cycle through all of your Essence abilities to give yourself cooldown reduction. But also it gives you a bit better synergy with classes like Priest, who can hit you with a PI, which gives you even more, I guess, overall greater output that allows you to absolutely unleash the most amount of damage you've ever seen. There's just a lot of interactions with the ability and the skill expression when it comes to this fast-paced opener that you can do as an evoker and maximizing as many of your abilities. And it's so sad to see that the ability is just getting kind of whittled away. This, for newer players, I feel like that skill expression is going to be nice not to have to worry about as much and not have to learn as much about the playstyle. Like there, I gotten 6 Empowerment abilities, which should have been yet another extension of my Dragon Rage, but I can't even capitalize on it. It feels so terrible. But what I was trying to say earlier is, as a newer player, it's quite a bit of a task to learn how to really optimize this proper go. Like if you are brand new to the Evoker, trying to find ways to maximize those Essence abilities, trying to figure out what is clipping when it comes to your rotation, how should you handle Disintegrate, what abilities take priority. There's quite a bit of a learning curve to the spec, but once you start really getting hands on it, that extension is probably one of the most interactive and fun mechanics that can really challenge the player and really help deliver some astronomical amounts of damage once you really start to figure out the spec. So this one is going to be a bit of a hit or miss for a lot of people. Moving things on though, because I don't want to dwell on what I personally think is a bit of a sad news, is Preservation and just a handful of changes that these guys have gotten. So for the most part with Preservation, all you should really know is towards the bottom capstones, there's a bit more of a theme. The left hand side is going to deal with green Dragonflight spells and abilities and that type of playstyle, so things such as Dream Breath are emphasized, as well as Dream Flight, as well as Cycle Life. Right hand side is very bronze centric with things such as Stasis as well as Grace Period, but the middle has more of a red Dragonflight themes around it. Things like Lifebind, but also things such as Titan's Gift, where Essence abilities increase the effectiveness of your Essence ability by 25%, or rather Essence Burst increases the abilities of Essence. So this could be used to heal allies with things like Echo, or to deal damage with things such as Disintegrate with Energy Loop, which could create a pretty interesting damage combo. Things such as Life Giver's Flame, which give Fire Breath a healing component. Things such as Life Force Mender, which again more damage and healing aspects. But also this feeds into Life Spark, which was one of Evoker's tier sets that allows your reversions to give your Living Flame a little bit extra power, making it do more damage or more healing, making it also instant cast and get additional charges. This in turn can give you better damage and rotation, which can give you even more procs of Essence Burst, which can then feed the rest of your healing playstyle, whether you play more bronze or green heavy. So for the most part, that's going to be a more battle damage, battle healer type of playstyle that is being more integrated into the Evoker through a set amount of talents that are all a bit more themed towards the center of the talent tree, which is a very fun playstyle. I think generally has been my favorite, but it's cool that there's a bit more of a thematic aspect towards your Evoker and how you can customize it. And from here on, we can just focus on all the changes coming to Augmentation, as this spec has been primarily a buff spec where you're focused on buffing your allies, making sure they're having a fantastic time playing the game, while you're for the most part hanging back, providing support, some healing, buff maintenance, maybe even some interrupts and disruptions with your knockups, your knockbacks and such. You are going to be a little bit more involved as Augmentation this time around. But taking a look at Augmentation, there's a couple of new talents, and one thing that a lot of Augmentation players will agree, the spec doesn't have a lot of options when it comes to building out your talents. For the most part, as Evokers, as Aug, you don't really have too many different capstones or different themed builds for you to play into. For the most part, you have one build that's focused on helping allies, and maybe you'll move around 1 or 2 talents at most to adjust the build, whether it is one instance or another, whether it is one affix is present or the other affix is present in the Mythic Plus scenario. But for the most part, you have a set in stone build that just stays the same, and they want to break that up a little bit going forward in this expansion. So if you're looking to have a little bit more variety on your Evoker, this expansion is hopefully going to be the expansion to deliver and being able to really customize your Augmentation fantasy. So we have new capstones, which some of them work, some of them don't really, but we'll get through them as we go through. Rumbling Earth is the first one. With Rumbling Earth, upheaval causes an aftershock at its location, dealing 50% of its damage 2 additional times, which actually offers quite a bit of damage, since for the most part Evokers, at least as Augmentation, are mostly focused on doing as much damage as they can through all of their empowerment abilities. But with Upheaval, you have 1, 2, and 3. It actually does a solid bit of damage overall, and it's a surprising amount of damage that it's actually able to offer. From there on, we have other capstones. This one is meant to be Molten Embers, but right now it's named Burning Embers, where Fire Breath increases the damage enemies take from all of your volcanic abilities, though a blue post reads all of your black Dragonflight abilities. As you look through all the Evoker abilities, you'll actually notice that there is a qualifier as to which flight they belong to. So Verdant Embrace is a green ability, or things such as Tip the Scales, bronze. Renew and Blaze is red, and certain things, usually defenses such as Obsidian Scales, Landslide, but also your Ebonite, your Eruption, and even Upheaval, all are part of the black Dragonflight. But also you'll see that they do volcanic damage, so I guess either way a lot of these do function pretty well damage-wise. So you things like Eruption is volcanic damage, things like Upheaval is volcanic damage. In fact, even things such as Deep Breath is volcanic damage that you normally don't spec into it. But this talent essentially just amplifies all of your black Dragonflight abilities, and it's a capstone that makes you want to commit further from Inferno's Blessing, where with Inferno's Blessing you buff your allies, giving them a higher chance to do additional damage as fire damage. But if you want to take it a step further to empower your damage and abilities with combo things such as Rumbling Earth, that could be an interesting burst setup, since you're usually using all these empowerment abilities together anyway. From there on, we have other talents such as Imminent Destruction, which is another talent to give you a little bit more freedom in how you can customize your Augmentation. With Imminent Destruction, Breath of Eons reduces the essence cost of Eruption by 1 and increases its damage by 10% for 15 seconds after you land. So again, a little bit more damage buffs for yourself, but also the cost reduction by 1 allows you to spam out your eruptions a lot more regularly. Putting myself in a spot with other players, eruptions is how you can extend things such as Ebonite. So once Ebonite is on your allies, you usually would throw out your empowerment abilities one after another, hitting as many targets as possible, and then from there you're spamming your eruptions. Being able to cut on the cost of your eruptions will actually let you prolong those Ebonite buffs as long as humanly possible, which is what's going to be a pretty big qualifier in terms of trying to maintain that buff mechanic on everybody else as best as you can. So this one's actually kind of huge, and it kind of leads into plot the futures. With Breath of Eons, it also grants you Bloodlust, so once you use your Breath of Eons here, you get a cost reduction as well as a damage buff that can synergize pretty well with things such as Burning Embers, which is also even more damage buff. And then you could go further down with Plot the Future, since you already have a talent here as well to give you a little bit more reason to head further down into this capstone row specifically. Now another role that's also getting amped up is this one over here with Motes of Possibility. These motes have been moved from one side of the tree to the other, and they've also been adjusted quite a bit. Eruption has a 15% chance to form a mote of diverted essence near you. Allies who come in contact of the mote will gain a random buff from your arsenal. Now, these buffs can be quite a variety of different things, but I'm just going to try to see if I can spawn one of these motes to show you what it looks like. There we go, there's a mote. One thing you'll notice with the mote, it'll actually try to maneuver itself towards a nearest ally. And what you can do, I'm pretty sure that they get a buff. It's actually going to give you one of the different buffs that Evokers can provide. So things such as your mastery with Shifting Sands, that can be provided for your allies. Things such as prescience, things such as ebb and might, I've seen it give buffs such as the Inferno's Blessing. So there's a variety of little buffs that you can provide to your allies, and now there's more of a reason for your anybody, your group members, for raid or dungeon members, to now chase after these motes yourselves. Now it's only a small chance for you to be able to actually get one of these motes, but it gives your allies a bit more of this buff focus, and that can synergize pretty well with things such as Imminent Destruction, which can let you spawn a bunch of these motes that you use in eruptions so regularly. Further down right below that, we also have Overlord, which has been adjusted to function better with these motes. Breath of Aeons casts an eruption at the first 3 enemies that strikes. These eruptions have a 100% chance to create a mode of possibility. So these modes, you're going to be able to get at least 3 of them immediately when you use your Breath of Aeons ability. You know what I'm going to do? I'm actually going to try to see if I can aim one of them. Right now the modes are only targeting me because I'm the only target that they can buff up. Symbiotic Bloom, that's one of the buffs they would be able to get. Double Symbiotic Bloom, so there's sometimes an ability for them to get the same exact buff that they've just gotten. So that's a little bit of one of those things that I'm kind of hoping changes in the future, where hopefully it's at least a different buff that they don't already have, or at least maybe it'll extend a buff that is about to fall off, like your Ebb and Might. But it's still one of those things that's kind of a work in progress, and I'm sure over our time over in the beta, they'll end up trying to make sure that all of these things are fixed and are functioning a little bit better. Yeah, this guy for some reason keeps getting Symbiotic Bloom more than any other buff, but he did get Shifting Sands, but for some reason, the game really wants to feed him as many of these blooms as at all possible. From there, however, we do get other abilities as well with some of the other talents that you'll find in the middle of the talent tree. One of them being Seismic Slam, which for some reason looks like an action ability, but it's actually a passive. Landslide causes enemies who are mid-air to be slammed to the ground, stunning them for 4 seconds. This ability, or this talent specifically, used to have 2 talent points maximum that you could invest into to go from a 2-second stun to a 4-second stun. They've just recently reduced it down to 1 talent point, full 4-second stun value. So if you're going for the knock up into a landslide right after, you're going to have a bit more of that consistency when it comes to Evoker stun potential with only 1 talent point invested. Again, more opportunity for you to invest those talent points everywhere else. Another buff that's also been adjusted is Timelessness, a buff that doesn't really get a lot of play. It's always been in a bit of a weird spot, I believe on the left-hand side, and you didn't really spend points to ever pick it up, but they moved it towards the center-ish area, so it's a little bit easier for you to invest into. What this buff does is it chance an ally to appear out of sync, basically making them generate 30% less threat. Again, might be an opportunity for this one to be taken, maybe in moments where you don't necessarily need to bestow Wernstone for certain fights. Besides this, for augmentation, we have things like Arcane Reach. So if you want to play into a more support role where you're looking to help your allies, the range of your helpful magics is increased by 5 yards. This includes things such as your healing abilities, but also any kind of support abilities such as Expunge, so you can get more dispels from a bit more of a distance. So if you like having a little bit more range for certain spells, Arcane Reach may be pretty good. I just don't really know if it's worth a talent point, but at least it's in a spot where you can kind of flow off of into other talents from here if you wish. Another ability has been added for augmentation that I've actually got a bit of chance to play around with is Sense Power. So with this buff, while it's active, the Evoker will be able to gauge the magical energy of their allies, showing you when the ally is using an exceptionally powerful ability. Now this is a buff that will need to be tuned by the devs over our time on the beta, because what we consider a powerful ability, essentially whenever they have cooldowns rolling, and what the devs have is sometimes not the same. Like every time your monk uses Zuen or if they use Storm, Earth, and Fire, this ability obviously shows up. But I would even argue that things such as Strike of the Windlord, for example, which isn't necessarily a big cooldown, it gives them a big burst window either way. So hopefully they'll be able to whitelist a bunch of different abilities that can then be sensed and picked up by Sense Power. But it is good that it's now showing you directly when somebody has some kind of a cooldown rolling, at least in your party. And having to track those cooldowns effectively does mean that a newer player is just not going to be able to unless they're outfitted with the right add-ons and weak auras. So this is at least a step forward to allowing newer players to have an easier time being able to gauge when somebody has cooldowns rolling. And I think this is a good change, and I wonder if they're going to do more of these. They also adjusted things such as your Prescience as well as Ebonite to be a little bit more likely to select somebody that does have cooldowns rolling. So they're trying to at least make Augmentation a little bit more newer player friendly, which is a good thing. Being able to remove some of that top-end complexity is one of their goals for this expansion, and I think it's a really good goal, and hopefully they'll be able to successfully do so. But hopefully they'll end up getting a lot of the community feedback as to which buffs the community of Evokers wants to see tracked. But with that being said, that's going to be everything I got so far for the Evoker. And you know, I'm actually very excited about this class. I think it's got some really good changes, but really at the end of the day, who cares what I think about this class? At the end of the day, I want to hear what you guys think about the Evoker changes that have been added so far into the War Within early period in the comments down below. What are your thoughts on Devastation, how they're kind of capping the ability for you to extend your Dragon Rage windows? What are your thoughts on some of the battle healer changes they've gotten for the preservation spec? And what are your thoughts about some of the different capstones and talent options for Augmentation? Are we possibly going to be seeing Augmentation develop some brand new builds, maybe even those with a bit more of a self-damage focus? Or do you think it's still just going to stay more or less the same, buffing your allies while kind of skimping out on personal glory? Let me know all of those thoughts in the comments down below. As per usual, if you guys enjoyed this video or found it informative, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. I would very much appreciate it. And as always, in the description of every single video and live stream, we have a link to our Discord community channel. Probably the best place to reach out to me directly in case you want to let me know what you thought about this video or hang out with the rest of the community to discuss some of the upcoming changes. Join our Discord to become part of the community. But otherwise, thank you all so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know all of your thoughts down below. And as always, I'll see all of you guys in another video.